Now, in his acceptance speech and talking about dealing with the economy, the president-elect says that, I quote, "We promise not to leave any Nigerian behind in our determination to create, expand, and ensure equitable and effective allocation of economic opportunities." Would you kindly explain this to us in normal parlance?
Oh, well, what the president-elect was speaking to there is the fact that many people complain about the fact that the growth that we've seen in Nigeria had not been inclusive.
It's not trickling down.
Well, it's not as excluded.
Not everybody is feeling it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he was speaking directly to the fact that in his time, he will do his best to ensure that no group, no region is left out of the growth process. That is going to make growth more inclusive.
Okay, can you give us a few ideas as to how this can be achieved?
Well, it takes...
And I'm coming to you with that question as well.
Well, he was saying, something about he's going to have a Marshall Plan, but the point about our economic evolution in the past and what we need to pay attention to going forward is that the economy has been left largely on its own. Government has done very little to guide the economy. For example, when growth happens, it happens, it's not been redistributed to regions where the growth has not been happening. If you didn't have oil, you didn't gain much from oil price growing from $25 to $140. If you don't have seaports, you don't gain from the boom in services. We say that services are now about 50% of the economy, but it's largely concentrated, in regions where you have ports, either airport or seaport. Now, government needs to do more to ensure that growth is redistributed across the country. I mean, I've heard the president-elect say something about rail transportation. It's a very strong means of integrating all the segments of the society. If your region is linked by rail, it doesn't matter that you are far from the port, because rail cargo transport costs are very low. It drives transportation costs. I'm not talking of commuter transport. I'm talking of cargo transport. If you have to truck things, truck fuel, truck cargo all over the country, it's going to be very, very expensive for some regions to be included. So he's talking about being conscious about groups that might be excluded, and government is going to do its best to ensure that all groups are included.
Now, if there were more manufacturing companies, for instance, would that not help distribution of this wealth that he's talking about, so that there'll be more jobs?
Yes. Well, again, we should remind ourselves that there were more manufacturing companies in Nigeria in the past.
The world had to move out.
Manufacturing was much bigger in Nigeria in the past. If manufacturing remained that big, more people will be included. So the key question is what killed manufacturing? And I just spoke about rail transport, cargo rail transportation. Most cities around Nigeria grew on the back of rail transportation. Wherever you find a rail terminus, a big market grows, a big city grows, and industries spring up. We need to bring rail transport back, not cosmetic rail transport reform. Transporting a few people twice or thrice a week. We need to shift, the haulage to rail. If we relink all the regions again, you would have included all cities, all regions. And manufacturing, you will just sit down and watch manufacturing
grow again.
Because people can provide their own power, they can't provide their own rail. Government needs to fix that, and they need to treat it with utmost urgency.
Okay. Tilewa.
Thank you. Well, at least I've had time to think about interesting concept about this growth and poverty and unemployment. What kind of puzzles me is that how with this percentage of our population in the middle class and having a consistent policy to try to push a significant portion of our population into a middle class that has the purchasing parity. Let's start from the basics. It costs a Nigerian has to move the Nigerian up above the poverty line. A Nigerian has to earn twice as much as the Indian. So because the Indians at a particular level of earnings, it takes them half of what a Nigerian will earn to move above a poverty line in India. In Nigeria, it costs us more, mainly because of our infrastructure deficits and quite a lot of things. So those are the sort of comparisons that you have to understand. So it's not that the Nigerian is not hardworking, but what he earns, if he was in India, he would have been okay. So, but he has to earn twice as much. So
let's look at what are those factors that are making the Indians more.
They have a lower, like he is saying, because they have a transaction costs are lower.
So your income gets
your income gets bigger. The cost of doing business in that environment is lower than in Nigeria. The infrastructure deficit with power, rail, transport, and all those sort of issues. So that's a big issue, challenge with poverty, and I think that's what we need to understand. But now the key essence is it's a political economy, and how do you distribute growth within your economy? That is the challenge. Now, currently, because of the drop in oil price and what we talked about, the fact that we don't have the buffers or the reserves, you have to finance the federal government. 90% of our revenues of the government is in recurrent. So government does not have money for investment.
Capital.
So if you don't invest...
We're hoping that's going to change, right?
It's not going to change because, you know, are you not going to pay your civil servants their salaries? I mean, that's what the recurrent expenditure is. The National Assembly's budget is $1 billion. You have to pay the judiciary. You have to pay all your civil servants, all the MDAs. I mean, you're not going to keep your government running. You're not going to pay your armed forces. You want to fight a war against terror. So when you keep talking about your current expenditure, this is something that you don't have a choice. You have to do that. You have to keep your government going. So the question now is, how do you get the investment to grow your economy? So if you talk about growth, then if you don't invest, how can you grow? And you always say about breaking it down so that we can simplify it for everybody to understand. If you're getting your salary and you're spending 90% of your salary on consumption and you're not making investments, how do you expect to grow? But if you have a mortgage and you have invested in your house, over the next 10 years, you find out that you have made good investments by taking a bit of your salary out every month, saving and investing it. And then you find out that in 10 years, you've grown, you've made your investments, and you're better off. So managing your personal finances and government finances is not a problem. So the question is, where do you get that investment from? And you have oil prices that have dropped. And since government did not invest, and you have a fiscal deficit in terms of your buffers, we never save for the rainy day. And that's why this sovereign wealth fund is important. So how do you now grow? So this is what you do. Now, the government now is faced this year with the deficit financing of close to about 2 trillion naira, maybe more. By the time they pass this budget, we'll find out exactly what it is. So when you look at that budget and then you tell me what is in that budget, then I can tell you how we can fund the growth. But it's a question of, is the glass half empty or half full? I believe it's half full, because what the government needs to do is the fact that, yes, the banks and all these financial institutions, we have the capacity to borrow. Let these guys bring in their 20 billion, their 30 billion from abroad. The banks are going to fund, they're going to have high returns on low quality assets from government treasuries. The last auction was very good. Yes, borrow 2 trillion, borrow 3 trillion, but don't borrow to fund your consumption. Borrow to fund investments, okay? And then what is also important is that 2 agencies are going to be key this time around: the Debt Management Office and the Concession Commission. There are many parastatals of government that can run on their own. In fact, there are about 15 projects. What about 8 trillion naira that consultants, international consultants have said are bankable projects that government does not need to put money into. Government does not need to pay for the airports running. Fine. Concession those things out so that all these people can put their money and you put it there. So you have savings. So your growth or your investment in growth depends on your strategy. So if the president-elect wants to do that, then he has to understand what is recurrent. He talks about leakages, that he also wants to block leakages. So let him focus on his civil service, consolidate his civil service, and then let the private sector create a concessioning environment whereby let go of a lot of all these things, privatize some of all these things, and put your economy in a way whereby these foreign investors, Nigerians, the global economy likes this country in terms of investment potential. But we need to create that enabling environment for this money to flow in and to stay. Okay, so those are the ways we can reverse that gap of funding those infrastructure.
This is higher than Economics 101.
Not really.
I'm sure that a lot of people now can understand exactly this picture that you both have painted. In fact, I got a tweet already saying
you have to break
these
it down.
Two economists are just brilliant. Bring them more often so that we can understand this economy.
You see, I always break everything down to personal. Take everything down to your personal finances.
All right.
How do you manage yourself?
Tilewa, we have to go. As sweet as this is getting and as so down to earth, I want to thank you so much, Messiah Teriba, an economist. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
And Tilewa Adebayo, also an economist. Thank you for coming on the show. So, as he says, you know how to manage your finances. You might just be headed in the right direction. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, Sunrise, we'll take another break and we will come back to continue. This time, we're looking at something else, but tied to Nigeria as well. Please stay with us.